Mocked, laughed at, underestimated, she flips a $700 million deal and leaves them speechless. The afternoon sun gleamed off the sprawling suburban mansion, casting long golden reflections across the polished black and silver cars, parked meticulously along the cobblestone driveway. The estate radiated opulence from the perfectly trimmed hedges framing the entrance to the towering marble columns that flanked the wide front doors. Every detail, every glimmer of light off a polished surface, whispered wealth, privilege, and power. Yet beneath the sparkling veneer, there was a subtle tension in the air, like the quiet before a storm. Down the driveway, a sleek black luxury car rolled to a smooth stop. The door opened, and Dr. Maya Ellis stepped out with quiet precision, her heels clicking softly on the stone as she took in the scene with calm, unwavering focus. At first glance, she appeared almost serene, an elegant black woman in her early 40s, her dark brown skin glowing subtly under the afternoon sun, shoulder-length straight black hair falling neatly over her shoulders. She wore a tailored navy suit, the cut impeccable, sharp lines framing her silhouette with understated authority. A crisp white blouse peeked from beneath the jacket, and in her hand she carried a slim leather briefcase, the weight of it symbolic not just of documents, but of the responsibility and ambition she carried within herself. Maya paused for a moment at the bottom of the steps, letting her eyes sweep across the mansion and its meticulously arranged splendor. She inhaled the faint scent of polished wood, fresh-cut grass, and the subtle hint of expensive perfume wafting from the open windows above. Everything about this place screamed old money, inherited influence, and a legacy meticulously curated to impress, intimidate, and, if necessary, belittle outsiders. Yet, despite the deliberate intimidation, Maya's posture remained flawless, her spine straight, her gaze steady. She had faced far tougher rooms, far crueler judgment, and she knew, with absolute certainty, the value of what she brought to the table. From the steps, the family emerged. The patriarch, tall and imposing, dressed in a cream-colored suit, stepped forward with a polite but calculated smile. Beside him, his wife, dressed in a pastel formal ensemble, observed with thinly veiled superiority, her eyes scanning Maya as if measuring every inch for flaws. Their two adult sons, impeccably dressed in gray tailored suits, lingered slightly behind, their laughter soft but loaded with condescension, the kind that stings when you realize it's directed at you without need for words. From the very first glance, the subtle stares, the faint narrowing of eyes, the quick exchange of whispered remarks, they made it clear. Maya was being evaluated not for her intellect, her experience, or her vision, but for the audacity of her presence. But Maya did not flinch. She did not soften her shoulders or lower her gaze. The whispers and stares swirled around her like a gust of wind she had long learned to weather. Each carefully poised step toward the mansion's entrance was a statement of her quiet confidence, a reminder that she belonged here not because of luck or favoritism, but because of years of intelligence, grit, and strategic brilliance. Her company, a rising titan in the tech industry, had already transformed sectors thought untouchable. Today, in these very rooms, she was poised to negotiate a $700 million merger deal that could redefine markets and cement her influence. And she knew it. As she approached the grand doors, her reflection shimmered briefly in the polished brass handles. In that instant, the contrast between her and the family hosting the meeting was undeniable. They had wealth, heritage, and entitlement. She had vision, skill, and resolve. The afternoon sun kissed the edges of her suit, highlighting the precise tailoring and the unwavering stance of a woman who had faced barriers, prejudice, and doubt, yet emerged stronger each time. Every whispered comment, every subtle smirk, only reinforced her focus. The opulence surrounding her was impressive, but it was irrelevant. She carried her own power, one that could not be polished, bought, or mocked. Stepping through the doorway, Maya's eyes swept across the grand interior, crystal chandeliers, polished floors reflecting the sunlight, and walls lined with family portraits that seemed to radiate superiority. Yet amid the beauty and the inherited prestige, Maya felt no fear. She felt anticipation. Today, she would sit at their table not as a guest hoping for acceptance, but as an equal commanding attention, respect, and recognition, and she knew, with every measured step she took across that marble floor, that the afternoon sun would bear witness not to who they were, but to what she would make of this moment. The dining room was a masterpiece of grandeur, every detail meticulously curated to impress, intimidate, and as Maya quickly realized, to subtly belittle those deemed outsiders. Golden sunlight poured through tall windows, reflecting off crystal. Chandeliers that hung like frozen constellations above a long mahogany table. Each place setting was immaculate. Polished silverware gleamed under the light, china plates rimmed in gold, and delicate crystal glasses sparkled like captured daylight. Every element whispered affluence, history, and a legacy of carefully maintained superiority. Maya Ellis entered the room with the same quiet confidence she had carried onto the mansion's driveway. The family rose as one, offering exaggerated smiles and formal gestures. The patriarch, tall and imposing, extended his hand in a perfectly rehearsed greeting. "Dr. Ellis, welcome," he said, his voice smooth, almost syrupy in its civility. His wife's nod was delicate, lips pressed in a polite line. The two sons lingered near the back, eyes sharp and calculating, lips twitching with suppressed amusement. To any casual observer, the scene might appear cordial, even warm. But Maya, trained by years of navigating hostile boardrooms and subtle prejudice, read the room with unerring precision. Their eyes betrayed judgment. Their smiles were armor for arrogance. And the faint tilt of their heads, the quick exchange of whispers, all told her she was being silently measured and found wanting. The lunch began under the veneer of formality. Servers moved with near-silent efficiency, setting trays of meticulously prepared dishes, seared fish glistening with buttery sheen, delicate salads arranged like miniature gardens, desserts that looked too perfect to eat. Conversation flowed, but beneath the polite chatter were razor-sharp edges. Small comments, easily missed if one wasn't paying attention, began to pierce the polished air. One son leaned slightly forward, voice casual but pointed. "It's impressive, of course, how far you've come." "From your background," he said, a faint smirk playing on his lips. His words were coated in feigned admiration, but Maya felt the sting beneath, a reminder that her success was, in their eyes, somehow anomalous, undeserved, the mother added. Her own subtle barbs, laughter tinkling like crystal, but hollow at the edges. "We do admire your luck," she said, as if implying that fortune, rather than skill or strategy, had brought Maya to this table. The younger son let out a soft chuckle, leaning back in his chair, and the patriarch's eyes flickered with amusement at the supposed cleverness of their coordinated subtlety. Each phrase was crafted to diminish, each laugh a reminder that, in their world, wealth and legacy were shields against the merit of an outsider. Maya listened, poised, her face a mask of calm neutrality. She nodded here, sipped her water there, offered a polite smile when appropriate. But beneath the surface, her heart flinched with each dismissive joke, each thinly veiled comment. The sting of their arrogance was real. Her chest tightened as she processed the layered insults hidden behind politeness. The way her presence seemed to rattle them more than she had anticipated. And yet, she said nothing not because she tolerated it, but because she understood the power of observation, the leverage of patience, and the quiet authority of knowledge. Her eyes roamed the room, scanning the subtle cues and visual echoes of their pride. Portraits lined the walls, ancestors staring down with sculpted faces, eyes filled with inherited grandeur and silent judgment. Silverware polished to a mirror shine glimmered like a challenge, every utensil a reminder that wealth, could mask cruelty in the guise of civility. Candlesticks of silver, ornate and cold, stood at perfect intervals along the table, and the wine glasses, crystal clear and empty, seemed to watch her as much as she watched the family. Each detail whispered a story. They were masters of perception, wielding refinement and opulence as tools of dominance. Every object, every glance, every carefully placed smile screamed one thing. This was their world, and she was being tested for audacity, resilience, and the nerve to claim space within. Yet Maya remained still, an island of composure amid subtle hostilities. Her mind catalogued everything, the laughter that tried to diminish her, the eyes that flickered with thinly veiled scorn, the objects that proclaimed centuries of privilege. She understood that strength often spoke in silence, that power was as much in listening as it was in speaking, and that today, the game was just beginning. The room might have been set to intimidate, but Maya was ready. With every polished surface and condescending glance, she gathered knowledge, fuel for the moment when her quiet authority would command the attention and respect she had earned. For now she sat, absorbing, watching, and calculating, while the family continued their display, unaware that their carefully orchestrated mockery had only tightened her resolve. The long mahogany table seemed to stretch endlessly under the soft glow of the chandeliers, each crystal prism refracting the late afternoon sunlight into 100 dancing points across the polished surface. The opulence of the room, the gleaming silverware, the rich burgundy leather chairs, the walls lined with portraits of ancestors who had built the family fortune, was designed to intimidate, to remind every visitor of the weight of history and inherited power. For most, it would be overwhelming. For Dr. Maya Ellis, it was just another arena. The discussion began with the expected formalities, polite nods, shallow compliments, and carefully measured statements about business strategy. But it wasn't long before the cracks in the family's composure began to appear. The patriarch leaned back in his cream-colored suit, his arms crossed, as if daring Maya to prove herself. "Perhaps you've considered the market projections differently," he said, his tone patronizing, a subtle correction disguised as guidance. One of the sons smirked as he added, "Actually, Maya, I think the figures you've cited might be a bit optimistic." Maya listened quietly, her hands folded neatly on the table, her expression calm and almost serene. Her dark brown eyes, sharp and intelligent, flicked from face to face, noting every twitch of a smirk, every glance exchanged behind her back. The family was playing their usual game: speak over, interrupt, and underestimate the outsider. They assumed their wealth, and legacy gave them an automatic advantage. They assumed she was unprepared, inexperienced, and that her carefully articulated insights could be dismissed with a flick of their well-manicured hands. Then, almost imperceptibly, the shift began. Maya leaned slightly forward, her voice calm, but confident, as if each word had been measured in a laboratory of precision. "I have reviewed your market analysis, and while the projections align with your historical trends, my team's data shows a potential 12% growth in the emerging sector over the next 18 months, provided we implement the suggested diversification strategy I outlined in last quarter's report," she said, her tone matter-of-fact, yet commanding attention. The family froze for a heartbeat. Eyes that had been dismissive flickered, eyebrows knitting in surprise. The patriarch coughed lightly, adjusting his tie as he tried to mask the shift in dynamics. Well, yes, but," he began, attempting to interrupt. Maya continued. Unfazed, she referenced numbers no one had expected, charts that had been meticulously prepared, and insights into emerging competitors that revealed a depth of research and foresight they clearly hadn't anticipated. Her brilliance unfolded. Gradually, each sentence a deliberate step into authority. She outlined contingency plans, predicted potential pitfalls, and presented strategies with a clarity and foresight that made it obvious she had spent hours, analyzing not only her own data, but theirs as well. The room that had been filled with the polished echoes of superiority now held a subtle tension, a ripple of unease that was nearly imperceptible but impossible to ignore. The shift was palpable. Where once her words had been met with smirks and light laughter, now there were pauses. The family's confidence began to waver. The patriarch's smile tightened, a thin line that did little to mask the anxiety beneath. One son's chuckle became nervous. Another attempted a louder laugh, as if sheer volume could cover his recognition that Maya was more prepared, more knowledgeable, and more formidable than they had assumed. Maya's face remained composed, revealing little of the satisfaction or vindication she felt. She didn't need to gloat. The evidence of her preparation and intelligence spoke volumes. Every chart, every statistic, every calculated insight became a silent rebuke to the arrogance and underestimation that had dominated the room moments earlier. She could see it, the subtle exchange of glances, the tightening jaws, the careful straightening of collars and hair, as the family realized, perhaps for the first time, that the outsider they had sought to mock was not just competent, but brilliant. The atmosphere thickened with tension, laughter now forced and sharper at the edges, as if trying to pierce the unshakable calm she exuded. Maya leaned back slightly, allowing a beat to let the information settle, her hands resting lightly on the table. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. The cracks had already formed, the illusions of superiority beginning to splinter, and the room was quietly acknowledging it, though none would say it aloud. The family had underestimated her. They had laughed, spoken over her, and tried to diminish her. And now, almost imperceptibly, the power dynamics had begun to shift, subtly, unmistakably, and irrevocably. For Maya, this was just the beginning. She had stepped into their world armed not with anger, but with preparation, precision, and a calm certainty that only years of navigating barriers could produce. The cracks were showing, and soon the full measure of her authority would leave them no choice but to acknowledge it. The mahogany table, gleaming under the warm afternoon light, had been a battlefield of words for nearly an hour. Every polished surface reflected not just the sunlight, but the subtle tensions that now filled the room. Dr. Maya Ellis sat at its head, calm and composed, her dark brown skin glowing softly under the cascading light from the tall windows. Her shoulder-length straight black hair framed her face with elegance, and her sharp, intelligent eyes scanned the room with unbroken focus. The navy blue tailored suit she wore emphasized her authority, every seam and line perfectly in place, every movement deliberate. Across the table, the wealthy white family's posture had begun to shift. Their initial arrogance, once sharp and confident, now wavered under the weight of Maya's precise knowledge, her unassailable insights, and the undeniable evidence that she had anticipated every point they had tried to use against her. Yet, despite their growing unease, there remained one who was unwilling or perhaps too proud to acknowledge the shift. The younger son, arrogant and brash, leaned back in his chair, an impish smirk curling across his lips. His tailored gray suit was impeccable, but it could not mask the sharp edge of entitlement in his expression. "Well, Dr. Ellis," he began, his voice dripping with false amusement, "you must be so grateful to even sit here at our table. After all, it's not every day someone from your background gets a seat in a room like this." The words were sharp as a knife, honed to wound. The room erupted in laughter, the mother's delicate chuckle slicing through the heavy air, the patriarch's deep, amused voice joining in, and the other son snickering at what he clearly thought was a clever quip. Their amusement was cruel, calculated, meant to assert dominance and remind her of the social hierarchy they assumed she recognized and respected. Maya did not move. Her hands rested lightly on the table, one holding a pen, the other folded neatly atop the leather briefcase at her side. Her eyes, dark and luminous, pierced through the mockery with a quiet intensity that seemed almost physical in its weight. She did not flinch. She did not answer immediately. She did not allow their laughter to dictate her response. Her calm, unwavering demeanor cut through the room's noise like a scalpel, slicing through arrogance and entitlement alike. A sudden, profound silence fell. The laughter, once brash and dominating, faltered. The smirks froze. Even the sunlight, streaming through the tall windows, seemed to pause, illuminating Maya's face as she placed her pen deliberately on the table, the soft click echoing with authority. The moment stretched, tense and charged, as if the entire room was holding its collective breath. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, and low, yet it carried an unmistakable weight. Every word resonated, filling the space between the ornate walls and polished silverware with undeniable authority. "You assume I am grateful," she said, her gaze unwavering. "But let me make one thing very clear. I am not here for your approval. I am here because the success of this merger and the vision we intend to achieve relies on my expertise, not the other way around." Heads turned slightly, eyes narrowing. Whispers of disbelief ran like a silent ripple across the table. Maya continued, her words precise, deliberate, each syllable weighted with truth. "You believe you control this room, this deal, this opportunity, but in reality, you need me far more than I need you, and that is a truth you cannot ignore." The patriarch's jaw tightened. The mother's polite composure faltered. Even the sons' faces, drained of color, struggled to regain the bravado they had so effortlessly displayed just moments before. The cruel joke, once a tool of domination, had shattered in the quiet force of her revelation. She had turned the table. Without raising her voice, without a single sarcastic remark, without conceding a fraction of her dignity, Maya leaned back slightly, allowing the weight of her statement to settle. The sunlight caught the glint in her eyes, sharp and unwavering, and for the first time, the family saw what they had failed to recognize. Brilliance, authority, and unshakable confidence could not be mocked, belittled, or subdued by wealth alone. The room remained tense, heavy with a mix of awe, shock, and growing respect that had nothing to do with courtesy and everything to do with truth. In that charged silence, Maya had done more than defend herself. She had exposed the delicate imbalance of power, asserting that real authority comes from preparation, intellect, and confidence, not inheritance or entitlement. The joke that was meant to humiliate her had instead illuminated her strength, leaving the family to confront her reality they had neither anticipated nor prepared to face. The tension in the grand dining room hung like a thick velvet curtain, heavy and unyielding. Every polished surface, the mahogany table, the silverware, the crystal glasses reflected not only the afternoon sunlight, but also the anxiety now creeping into the faces of the family. Dr. Maya Ellis remained seated at the head of the table, her dark brown skin glowing softly in the golden light, shoulder-length straight black hair perfectly framing her composed face. Her navy blue tailored suit and crisp white blouse were impeccable, exuding authority, precision, and unshakable confidence. She had absorbed the family's arrogance, endured their mocking laughter, and endured the thinly veiled condescension. Now it was time to assert control. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the faces of the patriarch, his wife, and their 2 adult sons. The subtle shift of posture, the tightening of jaws, the involuntary fidgeting of hands, every small gesture spoke volumes. They were unprepared for what was about to unfold, and Maya knew it. She leaned forward slightly, the soft creak of her chair a measured punctuation in the thick silence. Then, in a voice calm, clear, and deliberate, she began to speak. "I understand your expectations," she said, her tone polite yet unwavering, "and I've listened carefully to your insights, your advice, and yes, your criticisms. But before we proceed any further, there's something you should know." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, their weight pressing against the gilded walls of the room. My company has just secured a parallel deal with an international investor. The terms are substantial, strategic, and far-reaching, far beyond what this $700 million merger could ever offer. For a heartbeat, the room held its collective breath. Eyes widened, smirks faltered, and the father's hand gripped the edge of the table. Maya's voice remained steady, her calm presence a stark contrast to the rising tension. "Which brings me to the next point," she continued. "The $700 million deal currently on the table? It is no longer relevant. I am canceling it, effective immediately." The effect was instantaneous. Shock rippled across their faces, sharp and unrelenting. The patriarch's smile, once polished, smug, and self-assured, dropped into a thin, tight line of disbelief. His eyes darted from Maya to the papers on the table, as if hoping the numbers might have been a mistake, a misprint that would restore his sense of control. The mother, poised moments ago, pressed her hands together, her knuckles pale, her lips parting slightly in stunned silence. The two sons leaned forward, jaws slack, voices faltering as they struggled to comprehend what had just been said. Panic seeped into the room like water through cracks in a dam. The air, previously thick with arrogance and condescension, became dense with fear and uncertainty. The family, who had mocked her only moments ago, now realized their position was precarious. The empire they had assumed to be untouchable suddenly trembled on the brink, and it was clear Maya held the key to their stability. Desperation flashed in their eyes. The father's deep voice, usually commanding, now wavered. "Wait, Maya, we can renegotiate. Surely there's room." But Maya raised a hand, gentle yet firm, signaling the finality of her decision. The mother's usual composed tone faltered, and even the sons, often so brash, found themselves grasping for words that would never carry the same authority as hers. Maya's calm demeanor only intensified the effect. She did not gloat, she did not raise her voice. She simply sat, poised, allowing the truth of her power and preparation to resonate in the stunned silence. Every glance, every tightened jaw, every faltering attempt at persuasion underscored one fact. The family needed her far more than she needed them. The realization dawned fully on them, and the arrogance that had once shielded them from humility melted into outright panic. They began to plead, the patriarch leaning forward, his voice sharp with urgency now, the son stammering apologies, the mother imploring for reconsideration. Their wealth, their legacy, their carefully cultivated image, all of it now seemed irrelevant against the quiet, unwavering authority of a woman who had prepared, anticipated, and commanded the room with intellect and precision. Maya listened, her expression calm, almost serene. She allowed their pleas to wash over her without a flicker of hesitation. In that charged moment, the power had shifted irrevocably. The family's mockery had dissolved, replaced by desperation. And in the golden light streaming through the tall windows, it was clear who held the true influence in the room. Not wealth, not legacy, not arrogance, but preparation, intelligence, and unshakable self-respect. The atmosphere in the grand dining room had shifted entirely. The once polished veneer of dominance worn by the wealthy white family had crumbled under the quiet, unyielding authority of Dr. Maya Ellis. The golden afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows, catching the crystal chandeliers and polished mahogany surfaces, scattering flecks of light that seemed to dance across the faces of those who had underestimated her. The room, which had been a theater of mockery, condescension, and false smiles, was now thick with awe, disbelief, and the palpable tension of a family forced to confront the reality they had ignored for far too long. Maya rose from her chair, her movements measured, deliberate, and utterly calm. The navy blue tailored suit she wore fell perfectly with each motion, her white blouse crisp beneath the jacket, and her leather briefcase gripped firmly in one hand. Her heels clicked softly, yet confidently against the marble floor, each step echoing through the room like a metronome, counting the moments of her triumph. She did not rush. She did not falter. She carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who knew exactly the power she held, yet had no need to flaunt it. The family, still frozen at the table, now scrambled in response. The patriarch leaned forward, voice strained and unsteady. "Maya, wait. Please." The sons rose as well, their expressions a mixture of panic and pleading, while the mother's hands pressed together, her composure fractured into anxious gestures. They moved as if instinctively compelled to follow, to salvage whatever remained of the deal they had so carelessly assumed was theirs to control. But Maya did not turn. She did not glance over her shoulder. Every instinct of propriety and authority told her that to do so would diminish the moment she had painstakingly cultivated. As she walked toward the door, the warm afternoon light spilling through the tall windows seemed to embrace her like an old ally. It illuminated her dark brown skin with a soft glow, highlighting the smooth lines of her shoulder-length black hair and the sharp, intelligent brown eyes that had so unflinchingly met the family's arrogance. The sunlight spilled across the polished marble, catching the reflective surfaces of the silverware and crystal glasses left on the table. And as she passed, every flicker of reflected light seemed to underscore her triumph, an almost symbolic acknowledgement of dignity reclaimed, unshakable and undeniable. Outside, the sun felt brighter, freer, and more expansive than it had when she first arrived. The driveway, lined with immaculate hedges and polished luxury cars, seemed suddenly less intimidating and more like a stage set for her independence. The world beyond the mansion's gates held possibilities that were hers to define, not constrained by the narrow expectations and prejudices she had encountered inside. The breeze brushed against her face, carrying with it the faint scent of fresh-cut grass and warm stone. And for the first time since entering the house, Maya allowed herself the smallest, most private smile. It was not a smile of revenge. Did not relish the family's shock, their panic, or the sudden vulnerability that now lay bare before her. It was a smile of self-recognition, a quiet affirmation of the truth she had always known. Her worth could not be measured in dollars, manipulated by smug laughter, or belittled by arrogance. She had navigated their tests, their condescension, and their attempts to intimidate her, not by striking back, but by standing firm, prepared, and unwavering in her knowledge, skill, and vision. Her footsteps carried her down the driveway, heels striking the cobblestones in a measured rhythm, and each step felt like a claim staked on her own terms. The mansion, imposing and filled with inherited wealth, receded behind her. Its grandeur no longer held the power to overshadow her. She had proven, to herself and to those who had doubted her, that authority derived from preparation, intellect, and unshakable self-respect was far more formidable than any inherited privilege. Maya paused at the edge of the driveway, letting the sunlight fully warm her face. The air was alive with possibility, untainted by the whispers, smirks, or shallow politeness that had dominated the room just moments ago. She took a deep breath, letting the warmth, the clarity, and the sense of freedom sink into her being. Her faint smile lingered, a testament to the strength she carried within her, an acknowledgement that dignity, once reclaimed, could never be taken away. With that, she stepped forward, fully embracing the world that awaited beyond the mansion gates. Every shadow left behind, every tense glance from the family, was now a testament not to their failure, but to her mastery of herself and the situation. She walked forward, unshaken, untouchable by arrogance, carrying her pride not as a shield, but as a quiet, unassailable truth. In that moment, Dr. Maya Ellis was not just a CEO who had outmaneuvered a billion-dollar family. She was a living embodiment of intellect, resilience, and dignity that could not be bought, borrowed, or belittled. The mansion now lay behind Dr. Maya Ellis, its polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and gilded opulence reduced to mere scenery against the warmth of the afternoon sun. She paused for a moment at the edge of the driveway, letting the golden light touch her dark brown skin, highlighting the strength and dignity in her posture. Her shoulder-length straight black hair caught the sunlight, revealing subtle tones of warmth, and her intelligent brown eyes reflected a clarity that no room of wealth, no display of inherited privilege, could obscure. The events of the day, the whispers, the laughter, the subtle mockery now seemed almost distant, like ripples fading across a pond. Yet, their lessons had etched themselves deeply within her, resonating far beyond the confines of the mansion. True power, Maya reflected, was not measured in the number of zeros in a bank account, the legacy of a family name, or the ability to command a room through fear and entitlement. Those things, she knew, were temporary. They could build facades and create illusions of superiority, but they were brittle, easily shattered when confronted with intellect, preparation, and self-respect. Real strength, the kind that withstands mockery and prejudice, lies in resilience. Ability to endure disparagement without yielding, to maintain composure when confronted with arrogance, and to act decisively when the moment demands courage and clarity. As she walked along the tree-lined driveway, Maya considered the family's reactions throughout the lunch and negotiations. Their laughter, sharp and cruel in its intent, had attempted to belittle her, to remind her of her place as they saw it. The subtle digs about her background, the thinly veiled jokes about luck, the condescending corrections during the Mayu discussion, all were attempts to undermine confidence and assert dominance. For a moment, she admitted, there had been a sting. Their mockery was designed to provoke, to make her doubt, to remind her that she was an outsider in a room that had long been reserved for those who inherited power rather than earned it. Yet, as she reflected on her response, Maya understood that true authority is quiet and deliberate. It is not given by applause, nor bought through material possessions. It is forged through knowledge, preparation, and the steadfast belief in one's own worth. By listening, observing, and acting with precision, she had allowed the family's arrogance to expose itself. She had not shouted, not demanded respect. She had claimed it naturally, through competence and poise. The result was undeniable. Their empire, for all its wealth and legacy, was momentarily humbled before the undeniable fact of her expertise and foresight. Her steps carried her past the rows of perfectly trimmed hedges and polished luxury cars. Each reflection of privilege that once sought to intimidate her, now merely part of the scenery. She thought of the numbers she had quoted, the strategy she had outlined, the calm authority with which she had canceled the $700 million deal. Those actions were not fueled by vindictiveness or revenge. They were a testament to self-respect, to knowing one's own value, and to refusing to allow arrogance or entitlement to dictate terms. Integrity, she realized, is a form of power that outlasts mockery, a shield and a compass that guides decisions and actions in a way that wealth alone cannot replicate. Maya allowed herself a faint smile, one of quiet satisfaction rather than triumph over others. It was the satisfaction of someone who understood that respect is earned, that wisdom endures, and that character is far more resilient than inherited privilege. The lesson, she knew, was universal. Those who wield mockery and false superiority may dominate a room temporarily, but their influence is fleeting, easily eclipsed by knowledge, preparation, and dignity. In contrast, the person who holds fast to resilience, intelligence, and self-respect carries a power that cannot be borrowed, mocked, or diminished. As she stepped beyond the driveway, the sunlight fell fully upon her, warm and unobstructed, symbolizing freedom and the reclamation of her own authority. The mansion, the family, and their attempts to belittle her would fade from memory, but the truth she carried, the quiet, enduring power of integrity and wisdom, would remain. In the soft rustle of the leaves, in the gentle warmth of the afternoon sun, Maya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had walked through condescension, mockery, and expectation, and emerged not only victorious but undiminished, a living testament to the fact that true power is never inherited. It is earned, upheld, and lived with unwavering self-respect. In that serene, sunlit moment, the lesson crystallized. Mockery may sting for a moment, but integrity, intelligence, and resilience outlast the fleeting shadow of false superiority. Those who carry these qualities do not merely survive, they thrive, standing tall in a world that often underestimates them, proving that dignity and wisdom are ultimately the greatest legacies one can claim.